The first thing that I take away is for overall in Spokane County, the voters that were polled are saying the quality of life is overwhelmingly unfavorable on a scale of 1 to 10. That index came in at 3.6. And I believe the Spokane Business Journal today cited that a similar poll for Seattle voters showed that they believe their quality of life is at a rate of 4.6. Still not great, but it's a little higher than the Spokane region. I guess a lot of it is, wanting to get your takeaways from some main parts of this. So, looking at the quality of life, did that surprise you based on the sentiment that came out of the that index rate?
Yeah, I think the polling's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate anytime Spokane compares itself to Seattle. Um, but I think that there's certainly a lot of frustration out there. I'm very empathetic to that, and I don't want to ever minimize our concerns around public safety, housing, and homelessness. But I think you also have to look at a lot of the polling. A lot of the polling was done from folks who do not live inside the city. Certainly, though, there are really valid concerns there, and I think that it should be a call to action for us to all work harder to do better and really, I think, improve quality of life in Spokane.
Are there any when you read that, are there any steps that jump out at you that the city could be taking to try and change that perception?
A lot of it is capacity and funding. And so I think historically we are challenged with the demand and the need for services while not having a lot of the resources to provide those. And that's always been a large disconnect here in the city of Spokane. That's been my experience here this first year in office when it comes to response to complaints from police to code enforcement and to fire, really looking at public safety. We have to have the funding and the resources to meet those demands. The reality is too that the city has grown significantly, and as we've grown more, a lot of our services have not grown at the same time. And so, until we find some balance of those, I think we're still going to see a large gap in a lot of these issues.
It sounds like oh, hold on, where are we at here? I'm tracking with you in the sense that the demand for services has increased, but the availability of those services isn't keeping up.
100% correct. Yes.
And then I guess dialing it down here. So the top two concerns out of this poll, it showed half of voters cite homelessness as a top issue facing Spokane, with second being kind of lumped together crime, drugs, public safety. What is your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to the availability of services and resources. We know that we have had an increase in our unhoused population over the last 5 years. There's a lot of steps that the city is doing right now with scatter site shelters, moving away from a lot of the large congregate shelters that we've seen, I think drive a lot of activity. And also, we are right now in our budget discussions. As we know, the city has a budget deficit. Thanks to the work of Mayor Brown and also what council's looking at, we've been able to draw that budget deficit down. But part of that too is looking at how do we increase some funding for resources. The city has had a flat dollar amount for emergency shelter funding for the last few years, $250,000 for emergency inclement weather response. And as we know, as temperatures get below 32 degrees, that's woefully inadequate. So again, we have to look at, I think, a lot of the funding and incapacity issues for how we deal with these issues. You'll always hear, I think, a large complaint of, we're not enforcing laws. That is absolutely not true. Laws are being enforced. That is just an inaccurate perception. The difference is, though, that there's not a lot of funding and capacity to meet the demand of what is being asked with a lot of these new laws that are in place.
Mute here. And then I did want to pull up another option here. Bear with me. Oh, goodness. Okay. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, you're good.
Um, Another thing I wanted to ask you about. So the poll also talked about asking voters if they've actively considered moving out of the Spokane region, and it looks like countywide, 58% said yes, and then city of Spokane, another again same thing, 58%. Uh, did that surprise you? I mean, what do you make of that? So kind of the sentiment is people are considering leaving the area.
Yeah. I mean, you really have to challenge that. So look at our growth. So last year, the city broke our records for new housing permits. We had a 56% increase from the previous year in new housing permits. So that to me is a more solid data point than I think this number, quite honestly. We are a hot ticket in town for employment, for housing. We cannot keep up with the number of demand for homes, and I think there's just a lot of successes to point to in the city that I think challenge this narrative that everyone's wanting to leave. Part of growth too is people moving. That's just a reality. But I think to sort of frame it as, this is a majority of the community is wanting to leave town is absolutely absurd.
So you're not sold on that sentiment.
Not one, not 1 cent.
So then as a whole, do you think or how do you think that this survey gives insight to the city on maybe what's important to the community?
Yeah, I think it's there's nothing here that is too surprising in terms of the themes and the priorities. That is absolutely what I hear. It's more of the percentages. One of the percentages I heard was 90% of almost 90% of folks don't feel safe, downtown. Like that's again not not true. That is, I think, our events are, someone remarked to me that you have to have a reservation now to eat the places that you like on a downtown evening so often. And there's a lot to counter that narrative, but that doesn't mean that the priorities and the themes are incorrect. I think that those are valid, and those obviously are things that we are all focused on. The top three priorities that I hear all the time: public safety, homelessness, and housing, unquestionably. But I think that some of the underlying messages here and data points I am challenged with in this survey because I don't believe that they represent the city or county as a whole, rather than a swath of voters that did take the survey.
It sounds like you're taking the results of this survey with a pretty large size grain of salt.
Correct. I am. Yeah, I think the other thing I will say about downtown Spokane that I've heard a lot in the last couple of weeks from business owners is really trying to challenge the narrative. And my concern with this survey is that in some ways it can do more damage than good, where yes, there are challenges downtown. Nobody is saying that there's not, and I do not want to minimize those. But saying that downtown is is worse or more harmful than it actually is actually disinvesting in downtown. And I think that it's perpetuating a narrative that is making it harder for a lot of these businesses to get people to come downtown, because these businesses want people to come downtown. They want visitors, they want people dining at restaurants and buying goods. And so when you see this sort of narrative trying to blame us for, creating this unsafe environment, I'm really challenged with that narrative, because I think that it is ultimately doing a lot more harm to our city, to downtown, than it is good, and actually solving our very real challenges.
So do you, I guess, can you clarify, do you find this survey insightful then?
I see it insightful in terms of how it does validate, I think, the priorities. But there's a caveat to this and a nuance that I think can create more long lasting damage to businesses that are open late downtown, businesses that do want people to come. And if people are saying constantly, downtown is the worst, it's this, it's that, it's terrible, it's the self-perpetuating narrative that makes it harder to overcome, I think, a lot of the challenges, which again, the businesses downtown, they want people to come downtown.
I'm tracking with you on that. I think that answers it all. Let me double check here.
I had one more thing to add.
Sure, please.
Yeah, I think one way that we solve a lot of these issues, and that I wish had been included in this survey, is the need for housing specifically downtown, because I see housing as the way to solve a lot of these issues. Right now, we have been working on the conversion of commercial to residential. And so we're really the first city in the state to lead on this. So we have properties that right now, as we speak, are being converted, and that will help bring a lot more visibility and people, and help activate a lot of those issues. You solve a lot of the issues around housing and public safety. And so what I would like to learn more is what do people want to see if they want to live downtown, because I see that as really helping activate a lot of our businesses and spaces.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. A little bit more fact finding there. So, Councilmember Dillon, can you speak to what's maybe the most well, let's see, where am I looking here? Um, what would you say is the most beneficial takeaway that you got from this survey?
I think it's an important reminder about what are the core issues that people want to see improvements on. And that's something that we should all be able to agree on. Everybody should be safe and feel safe in their community. We don't want people sleeping outside. We want people to be housed. We want people to get the resources for mental health, for substance abuse. And so, despite maybe some political differences, I think we really agree on those key themes. And that's what this survey ultimately does connect back to.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Talking about GSI's The Pulse survey results, have you had a chance to briefly look at some of the takeaways or?
Yeah, I've been
Okay,
just kind of slowly going through it. It's
sure.
really, yeah, a lot of just very interesting, fascinating information.
Yeah, really, I would say there's a wide scope of things that I guess I wasn't expecting to see results on. So, I guess just start off with what's a number one takeaway that you get from reading through what you have so far?
Well, I mean, clearly the vast majority, I mean, a super majority of the community thinks that we are not doing the right things, heading in the right direction, and that their local government, be it us, the county, the valley, whomever they consider their local government, they don't consider trustworthy. And I think that should be pretty eye-opening for just about everybody in local government.
Do you think that's a fair assessment? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's very fair. I'll be honest, it was surprising to me to see that those sentiments didn't just cross party lines, which in itself is amazing. It crosses generational lines, it crosses racial lines, it crosses just about everything. And so the fact that this is just across the board should be pretty eye-opening.
I gather a sense of a different take on this from your perspective compared to Councilmember Dillon's. He recognizes the results, but also kind of is taking it with a pretty large grain of salt. Or it sounds like you're taking it at face value as a place to see some change. Am I tracking with you on that?
Sure. I mean, we can all be poll deniers. I mean, this happens all the time. You know, you don't like the outcome, so you just sort of deny that that's actually the truth. But I will just say, I mean, I think I've seen enough polls and I've participated in enough polling efforts to understand how it works. And this is the sentiment. I mean, we can all sit here and disagree and say, well, we see it differently, and that's fine. But frankly, that means that we are not seeing things the way that our constituents are. And that's the problem. Our constituents do not see a safe downtown. They do not see a safe community. They do not see elected officials that they trust. They do not see money being spent wisely. They don't believe that we have to continuously raise taxes to pay for what appears to be non-priority things for the community. And those are all things that we should be taking to heart. We can, when you've got 75% of the community just 1 year ago saying, enforce camping laws, we want you to do this. And we still are truly not to the totality that we should be enforcing those laws. And in fact, now you've got a council that a majority that is holding roundtables to figure out how, with a much, much smaller percentage of the population, they can change those laws in ways that I don't think that majority would agree with. That's a problem. We are not in concert with our constituents. And so at the end of the day, I think this is a tool that council members, the mayor, county commissioners, valley council members, it's not just the city, it's everybody, should be looking at closely to say, hey, if there's a perception problem, then what needs to happen to fix it? And if there's a real, actual, on the ground issue, then we need to be making, bold steps to address it. And that's got to happen quick, because if the people don't trust us, and I don't know that we've given them a lot of good reasons to, but if they don't trust us, then that really compromises our authority and our ability to do the things that we need to. And that's a huge problem. So building trust in the community is going to be really, really important.
You mentioned referred to it as a tool. It sounds like you'd like to use this survey and the response from Spokane County voters to really dive into what can we do to address this and address those concerns.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we're getting firsthand information, and frankly, most of the efforts that the city does to get this sort of input, it's never done in a scientific way, so it's not necessarily trustworthy. Typically, it's distributed amongst particular groups because there are council members who are closer to those groups, and I'm not saying it's partisan or anything else, but just they have closer relationships with certain folks, and so those are the folks that participate, and that's the feedback loop that we get. And so we're using these types of tools, which have generally not been that available in a public way until GSI had decided to start doing this. I think is really important, and I think it's going to be great to see what this happens, on a quarterly or half annual basis, however they do it, to see what the trends are, how they change. We can look at the policies that have been in effect in that time to see if that's what's moving the needle, the right way or the wrong way. I think it's a great tool. It's a great tool, and I would love to see, frankly, more of the media doing these sorts of polls. We see these in larger cities where you've got newspapers and TV news that go in together and do big polls like this to help inform the community. And I think that there's more opportunities for that kind of thing to happen alongside what GSI is, to help bolster that information and keep us on the right path.
So, Councilmember Cathcart, what would you say was the most beneficial takeaway from this survey?
Well, the most beneficial aspect of the survey was that they released the crosstabs. And to me, that's the most important part, because that's how you can really drill down and get a sense of how things are at a smaller level. And so you can break this down and look at just the city of Spokane and get a sense of, what those crosstabs look like for, those various issues within the city. Now, generally, they tend to track pretty similar to outside the city, but not universally. And looking at some of the different perspectives from, say, 18 to 29-year-olds versus 65-plus-year-olds, BIPOC community versus white. I mean, there are a lot of similarities, and there are also some very interesting deviations that occur here and there where you might not expect it. And, like a higher percentage of folks seeing policing being, a big need across most demographics, but then you might look at one subgroup and it's less. And so you say, okay, why? And so let's ask questions. Let's start talking to those folks and maybe get a sense of, what's the reason? Is there something we can do to improve things in a different way, for them? And so I just think it's important that we start looking at all the data and use it as a tool to help us to get back on the right track.
A particular sentiment from the survey that was the most eye-opening to you, or one that you think this is something the city needs to work on or change priority on?
Trust. I think trust should absolutely be the biggest thing. When you see, trust in how local government spends money, things like that, being in the single digits. I mean, less than the approval ratings for Congress, which, I think that's crazy. I mean, absolutely nuts that might be the sentiment of the community. And these are snapshots in time. And so that could change today or tomorrow. But this is the tool we have to understand the feelings of the community and the perspectives of the community. And so let's take that to heart and say, okay, they don't trust us. So what do we need to do to go rebuild trust? How do we do that? If 75% 1 year ago said they want Prop 1 fully enforced, and we're not doing that, might that be contributing towards the lack of trust? I just think there's a lot of things that we should be thinking about, talking to the community about, and figuring out how do we rebuild that trust? Because at the end of the day, when big things need to happen, they're not going to be possible if we don't have the trust of the community.
I want to ask you about two results that kind of stood out to me. One of the top concerns, or the top concern among surveyors, was homelessness in the region and in the city. It showed about half of voters called that a top priority, and the second behind that was kind of lumped together: crime, drugs, public safety.
Yeah.
What do you take from that finding?
Yeah, I mean, that tracks the same as most of the polls I've seen the last few years. And obviously there could be nuance in certain aspects of that, but clearly I think it resonates that the public doesn't feel like there's enough happening. And so it continues to be the top issue because it's obviously not improving to their satisfaction. And so it makes total sense to me that those would be top issues. And clearly, when you look even further, it's pretty clear that those are, the high priorities. I mean, you look at, should the city be focusing on, the core priorities of public safety and infrastructure, that rate's off the roof. And, and instead we continue to, spend a whole lot of time and money in areas that are outside of that. And so, I think it really makes a great point that, should we really be asking the public to raise taxes just to pay for public safety, or should we be asking the public to raise taxes to pay for all of the additional nice to haves that we hear that are not necessarily priorities for the vast majority? That's a conversation that we should be having and that we should be maybe taking away from survey results like this.
And then the other one I wanted to look at was the question of, have you considered leaving the Spokane region? Oh,
yeah.
We may be running out of time. Hang on. What's going on here? Might have to wrap this up or hop on the link again. 1 second. Question of, have you considered leaving the Spokane area? And it looked like in the county and the city, both areas, it showed 58% said yes. Yeah. And they attribute that, let me back up. Let me find that. Wanted to make sure to read this properly here. Bear with me. Okay, so 58% within the county and the city are saying they've considered the idea of leaving the region. One of the things with the quality of life index at a 3.6 out of 10, they say the key findings are concerns about homelessness and public safety are widespread, and voters believe addressing these issues will have a significant impact on the quality of life in the area. Yeah. Kind of throwing a lot at you there, but I guess what do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that that's definitely true. And those that have the means, perhaps those that would be contributing more greatly to the economy, are probably the ones that are at the most risk of leaving. So those are things that we should think about. But the other factor in that too, if I remember correctly, if you break that down further and you look at it based on the sub tabs of those who have been here a shorter amount of time versus a longer amount of time, it's different. It's interesting because I think those who've been here a shorter amount of time have more tolerance for some of these things than those who have been here a longer amount of time. And it's just, again, very interesting to break these down into those subcategories. But clearly, there's just a great dissatisfaction with how people feel. And, I think everybody has a right to live in a safe community. And I don't think, at least based on these survey results, I don't think that the perception of the community is that we are safe. Now, there are I think a lot of things that we are doing to try and improve that. And perhaps there's a lot more communication that needs to happen to let people know of what's going on and how we're trying to make downtown safer and things that have been incorporated there. And so folks may not understand all that, but it doesn't really matter. If their perception is that it's unsafe, then it kind of becomes the reality. And we have to address that in a big way so that people want to come downtown and shop. They want to stay in the city of Spokane or in this Spokane region as a resident and not, move away and cause economic impacts, brain drain impacts, all that kind of stuff. We really want to see not just people staying here, but growth. And you do that, through making it a safe community.
So then, Councilmember Cathcart, do you find this, or I guess, how do you find this survey insightful as a city council member?
Well, like I said, I think it's a great tool to understand where people are at this moment and how we might be able to improve things and get things on a better track, or hopefully the right track, in terms of the perception of the voters and the constituents that we represent. It's also a snapshot in time. And so, the more of these surveys that are produced by, whether it be by GSI, by the news media, as I said, I think that would make a lot of sense, or other organizations. It gives you a great opportunity to see what the numbers look like, but probably more accurately what the trends look like. And I think that, that's really helpful. You take the point in time count as sort of one example. I don't know that I necessarily believe the actual outcome of that, but you can look year to year at the trends. And that's what really, I think, helps you understand, are we moving in a better direction or a worse direction? And I think that from these surveys, while I think the numbers should be taken seriously, it's the trends over time that I think are going to really show whether we're doing the right things to correct the issues that people see.
I think that hits it on the head. I appreciate your time for talking through that with me today.